may be seated. Please join me in welcoming Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Richard Tudor, U.S. Army retired, for the invocation.
Almighty God, we ask your continued blessing upon this place, Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery. Sanctify and keep it holy, that it may always be an honored resting place for those who have faithfully served our country in the United States military. As we gaze upon their graves, may their service and sacrifice speak loudly to us. Duty, honor, country. Amen.
Amen.
Good afternoon. It is an honor to welcome you all to Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery. My name is Raymond Dan. I'm a class of 2018 director intern and a former cemetery representative here at Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery. I'm excited to be with you all here today to unveil the newest monument on these sacred and hallowed grounds. Without any further ado, please welcome, speaking on behalf of Meaningful Causes, Michael Bongner.
Good afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce you to a few people in the audience out there. Start with Wesleyan Provolé, Phyllis Casper. Wesley didn't make it. Kim Palmer, Carol Woodsmith. Please remain standing for a minute. And Deborah Thomas, our founder. Without their unwavering efforts, we wouldn't be here today. I was merely a recruit, and I'm forever grateful for their time and effort. You can see. Mrs. Thomas actually started this project in 1985 when her mother and the wife of Richard W. Sanders, a U.S. Navy veteran, was interred in Section BB. Mrs. Thomas, like many of the rest of us, felt betrayed when her mother was given an invisible grave marker that would be shared with her father in 1990. She sought a simple solution but was met with resistance. Looking back, the National Cemetery Administration probably wishes they would have found a quick way to close that book. Instead, they found truth in the quote that hell knows no fury like a woman scorned. Her first letter started a campaign that would lead to a gathering of over 1,000 signatures and the beginning of her group called Meaningful Causes. Her dedication to honoring the veterans and families represented by the flat markers behind me is nothing short of heroic. We've all seen the news stories of the Memorial Day flag ceremony that's hosted every year by the Boy Scouts of America. We've seen the funerals of notable patriots. We've seen video tributes to fallen military members. With each of these, we who are gathered here share a common bond. We are the people who notice that the flat stone sections are never represented in those stories. We will never see the names of our loved ones appear randomly on the screen. The headstones in these sections represent about 7,500 veterans. Some of their family members have no objections to the flat markers, but many of them shared their stories with us and agreed with our goals. Some never sought the reasons behind the decision and just accepted what they were given and secretly remained confused. For my family, it started in 1985 when my father, Paul Bongner, passed away. I was serving on active duty aboard the USS Carl Vinson, an aircraft carrier out of Alameda, California. I came home for his funeral, and I recall with pride as I stood in my dress blues during the full military tribute in his honor. I wouldn't return to St. Louis until November that same year, and I remember my disappointment when my mom and I couldn't find his headstone. After we found it, I just asked my mom why Dad didn't get an upright stone. She didn't have the answer, nor the wherewithal to seek it. Each time I visited or thought about my dad's grave, I would remind myself of one of the most famous war poems ever written. The first verse goes like this: "In Flanders fields the poppies grow, between the crosses row on row. that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly. The poem goes on to remind us that it is our job to take up their torch and continue to fight in their honor. Although my family chose to pay and move my dad to a new grave, the cause remained in my heart for the remaining families, and I'm still a little bitter that it ever happened in the first place. My story is not uncommon, and those of us who share similar experiences, heartbreak, and confusion are thankful that someone took those words of that poem to heart and took up the torches whose crosses, row on row, are not seen. Deborah Thomas is that person. I won't go into great detail about the efforts, but I will tell you that the battle was not easy. There were hours of phone calls, dozens of letters and emails, and several face-to-face meetings. After a direction was chosen, there were negotiations, and finally a compromise that got us 5 plaques to rise among the 7 sections. Prior to the placement of these new plaques, the graves around us went unnoticed and unseen. So on behalf of the veterans and family members whose lives are memorialized in these sections, thank you, Debbie. God bless you, and God bless Meaningful Causes.
Thank you, Mr. Bongner. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to welcome our keynote speaker, the Deputy Undersecretary for Field Programs and Cemetery Operations, Mr. Glenn Powers.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to speak about meaningful causes as well in a moment, and some of the folks that Mike already recognized, and go maybe a little bit deeper than that. But first, I also like to thank everybody who's involved in this ceremony, from the Honor Guard, the Patriot Guard, the cemetery staff, to the beautiful vocalist and the chaplain. Thanks for doing this. And I know, there are ceremonies here at Jefferson Barracks throughout the year, and it's the commitment of the community that makes it such a special place. And even if I haven't recognized you, thank you. But I do want to speak and describe a little bit about what Mike talked about, and Debbie and her group, Meaningful Causes, and what she's done. A few weeks ago, I attended a meeting of senior leaders of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and they premiered some radio ads that may or may not come up on the radio to talk about veterans issues. And somehow they got Tom Hanks to do the vocals for this. And Tom Hanks starts out this presentation, and actually the subject is actually something that is very, very critical to the Department of Veterans Affairs and to all veterans, which is veteran suicide. But it starts out in typical Tom Hanks fashion, and he says, "It's not simple. It never is." And that's sort of the story here with Debbie and Meaningful Causes and everything that they've been through. And we're proud here today to be able to shortly unveil this monument, which will, as Mike says, bring some visibility to these markers. We know that those who have loved ones here know where these markers are. But often, especially when when somebody's driving by very quickly and there's obviously, physically they'll look to the right and not notice anything here. And we don't want them to do that. We want them to take in these monuments that have been what we call strategically placed to go ahead and draw somebody's attention to say, hey, there's something there I should look at. And when they do, hopefully pull over, because we think we've made it attractive enough for them to pull over, they'll read about why a little bit, not much, what happened here between 1982 and 1987, when approximately 7,500 veterans and loved ones were buried under flat markers. It was a decision made. Sometimes those decisions, you look at them in retrospect and you say, well, I wouldn't have made that decision. But there was a decision made to use flat markers within this system. And in fact, it was made nationwide. So there are 78 other cemeteries. I'm responsible and lucky to be involved in the operations of 135 national cemeteries. But when that decision was made in the early 1980s, what resulted was there were 78 cemeteries that now have a mix of markers between the uprights and the flat markers. And then in 1987, I think enough people heard the call, and you know, one thing that we have to listen to is we have to listen to the law, and the law was changed and said, you know, we want you to go back at those cemeteries that were traditionally upright markers. We want you to use the upright markers again. So yeah, and Mike mentioned the feelings, I think, that the variable feelings that I think many families had about that issue, and it's a difficult one. And so certainly Mike mentioned Debbie and her efforts. I've been, you know, since I've been involved in this, since I retired from the Army and was fortunate enough to find a position with the Cemetery Administration, I've come to know this issue. When Debbie and Meaningful Causes invited me out to talk to them, I thought I was going to be able to explain the situation, and that it would, you know, I'd just explain it and that would be it. It wasn't that, as I said. It's not simple. It's not simple, and it never is. And we talked a lot about it. And to this day, Debbie and I probably don't agree on everything. But I think we made an accomplishment here in order to bring people's eyes to these flat marker sections in Jefferson Barracks. These aren't the only places where flat markers are. In fact, you know, one of the not simple things is we have some of our cemeteries that are entirely flat markers, and they're actually some of our most beautiful and pristine cemeteries. And it's usually better. So occasionally you get a question, why weren't the upright markers used there? But when there's not the mix, there's really not as much of an issue. There's 9 cemeteries like that, including probably one of our most famous in our administration, which is called, its official name is the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific. Its unofficial name is called the Punch Bowl. So if you've ever been to Hawaii, and by the way, if you've not been to Hawaii, you have to go. Make sure that you visit the Punch Bowl. It really is beautiful. And we have 8 other beautiful cemeteries which are entirely flat markers. We also today still give flat markers to people who request them at private cemeteries, veterans who request them, because for every veteran or family member we bury in one of our national cemeteries, we provide gravestones and flat markers, depending on what the family wants, 3 times as many nationwide in honor of our veterans. My father is buried in a county veteran cemetery in Rockland County, New York, and he's buried under a flat marker. So, as I said, it's not simple. It never is. Another thing is, you know, we could call this. You know, we've referred to this on the program as an unveiling. I think Debbie would refer to it as a dedication.